Okay. Reena Bernards, welcome. Welcome to the Robin Smith Show. It's so great to have you here.
Thanks so much. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So we should let our listeners and viewers know a little bit about, I'd like to just start by saying how I met you, how I even know about you. I had the privilege of meeting you. You were my first nighttime supervisor at the couple and family therapy program at University of Maryland. And back then, I just have to say just a little bit about why that was important for me, which was when I came into the grad program, I had all sorts of flavors of imposter syndrome. And I felt like, gosh, the director, whoever was gatekeeping made a total mistake, and they totally botched this. And so I had all this anxiety, all this doubt. I remember the first doorbell. It's like, Robin, your client's here. And my heart was just like, a good thing it was a big room, because I think my heart went somewhere like 50 yards away, whatever it was. I was such a mess. And meeting with you, your support and your guidance, your energy was just very supportive. And I now appreciate how important that is, having tasted not just the student therapist intern role, but also the supervisor role. So I just publicly thank you for helping kind of wring out all the worries and fears that my nervous system carried into that program. Thank you, Reena. And that's how I met you.
Well, I really appreciate that. You were a star student. For whatever imposter syndrome you have, you were a natural therapist. So it was very easy to supervise you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm curious to share with our listeners how you came into the field. I invited you on the show because I want you to talk about your work with Braver Angels. But before we get to that project, that greater project, how did you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey into coming into the professional role that you're in now, and wherever you want to start, Reena?
Sure. I guess, well, coming out of college, I was a community organizer working on housing and low and moderate income consumer issues. And I did that for about 5 years. And then I became the director of an organization called New Jewish Agenda, which the issue that we dealt with that we were most known for was Israeli-Palestinian peace. Now, this was the early 80s, and the work we did was not appreciated in some places. So it was an uphill fight. I left that organization after about 5 years and started a dialogue project with Jewish and Palestinian women leaders in this country. So as women who had risen to the upper echelon of leadership in their community. And we did 3 or 4 weekends together. We came out with, this was 88. We came out with a statement of principles and sent groups out into the community to speak about that, a Palestinian and a Jew. That was really exciting work. And it got me turned on to the whole process of dialogue. However, when I was writing a little bit about this, I realized that my father, who was a liberal rabbi, worked as the director of interreligious cooperation for the Anti-Defamation League, doing Jewish-Christian dialogue.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of, without realizing it, I had followed in his footsteps.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so I began to do some consulting on intergroup dialogue and how to form a dialogue between any two groups in conflict. And then one day I got tired of consulting and decided to become a family therapist.
Well, so what was the before we pivot to your work as a marriage and family therapist, how did you, I'm curious, you said it was exciting work. Do you have any stories of, I imagine it's not without its risks of falling into pits and people getting activated, all sorts of stuff. I mean, is there a story that comes to mind that you took with you?
Yeah, we had, this is why I love that I did it with women. We had a weekend and we started at one point talking about Zionism. And the Jewish women were really activated by some of what the Palestinians were saying. One particular Jewish woman who was Orthodox and very steeped in the Jewish community, she became really upset by what was happening. And there was a lot of tension in the room. And one of the Palestinian women sitting next to her said, "I really like your shoes." And it just broke the tension. And we got to be able to see each other as people again, and found a way forward. So we also took a trip to Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza together. This was in the 90s after the Oslo Peace Accords were signed. And I remember in the evenings, we would debrief on what we had experienced. And sometimes we would write about what we had experienced. And we had gone to a refugee camp in the Gaza Strip. And the same Orthodox woman read us what she had written. And what she had written was about how 7 people were sleeping in one room, but during the day they piled the blankets so neatly up in a stack, and how that moved her. So we really connected humanly, and we were part of a peace movement that was a lot stronger in those days and a lot more hopeful. But you and I are talking on the day where a ceasefire has just been announced.
Oh,
the second ceasefire and return of some of the hostages. So this is good news.
Wow. I have not tuned into the news today, so I'm just learning about this just now.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. How did that news strike you, Reena?
This has been a really, really hard year for anybody that cares about Israeli-Palestinian peace. I mean, first of all, to take in the devastation of the war on mostly the Gazan people, but also the disruption in Israeli society, and the turning away from peace that's happening within Israeli society is really discouraging, and also within the Jewish community here. I'm hoping when there's an end to this war, people will start thinking better about what's going on and how to really have a way forward in the region. But it's been a hard year.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. What's coming to mind is the contrast between the belief structures, the ideologies, how that it's almost as if, how when you go to the movie theater, sometimes you go to just a regular movie, sometimes you go to a 3D movie, and you need to put on the 3D glasses. That actually happened recently to my family. Anyway, I won't digress, but we didn't know we were in a 3D movie. And I was like, oh, I got to go grab glasses. Anyway, but the point being is that the belief structure comes with its own set of how you view another person, and because of what you presuppose about their belief structure. And the anecdote that you shared about the compliment of the shoes and just the ground humanity there that somehow takes the glasses off.
Right.
Even for a brief glimpse that can or cannot be sustained. It's powerful. Yeah. So you got tired? Is that true? You got bored of consultation, or?
No, I didn't get bored. What happened is, so I started teaching people how to do dialogue in different communities. And some old desire to be a family therapist kicked up in me.
How old are we talking? When did that first get planted?
How old was I?
Well, no. How you said an old desire. So yeah, when you
okay,
first.
So here's the story. I had a boyfriend right out of college whose father was the director of the Ackerman Institute.
Oh, okay.
Which is Family Therapy Institute. And I don't remember signing any consent forms. Maybe we did, but we got to observe 3 sessions at the Ackerman Institute. And of course, I was very young at the time. I thought, wow, this is really amazing. So it was in my head about how amazing things can happen in the room, in a therapy room. I think what happened with consulting is that you have to constantly be putting yourself out there, and family therapy seemed like a more way to, there's so many people that needs help and support and therapy and couples therapy that it's been an easier road to hoe that way. So, but in the back of my mind, you know, the 2000 election, ever since the 2000 election, which, you know, we've had some really awful ones since, but that was really bad. The Gore Bush fight. In my head, I was thinking we really need a red blue conservative liberal dialogue. It seems really important for this country. That was in 2000. And, but I knew my experience with doing the Jewish-Palestinian dialogue is I had a Palestinian partner. She and I became very close. And I knew that it required that kind of joint leadership to make a dialogue happen. And I frankly didn't know any Republicans, nor was I clear on how to meet them. So it was a good idea, but I didn't do anything about it. Then after 2016, I was listening to NPR, and Bill Doherty, who is a leader in marriage and family therapy, came on the radio and talked about this new project he was one of the founders of that was bringing reds and blues together. And I said, wow, if Bill Doherty's doing this, he must be on the right track. So I attended a workshop that they were doing a workshop here in Maryland, and I attended it. And then I got trained to be one of the first moderators. Bill Doherty trained, like, I don't know, at that time, maybe 20 people to be the first moderators of workshops that he wasn't doing. But to back up how Braver Angels got started, the president, whose name is David Blankenhorn, lives on the Upper West Side. And the day after the 2016 election, he called a colleague whose name is also David Lapp, who lives in rural Oregon. Rural Ohio, South Lebanon, Ohio. And David from New York said, Upper West Side, it's like all doom and gloom here. How is it there? And he says, we're all about hope and change here. So David Blankenhorn, who's now the president of the organization, said, David, can you organize a gathering of 10 Hillary voters and 10 Trump voters and spend the weekend together? And they did. That was the first gathering. And it was so successful. And Bill Doherty was brought in to moderate it. They said, okay, we've got all these people going. What do we do? I don't know. Call Bill Doherty. He'll figure it out. And he did. He figured out a model to work with these two groups. And it was very successful. They did another one. And interestingly enough, Peter Yarrow came to the second one and paid for a movie to be made about this encounter. And as you might have heard, Peter Yarrow passed away this past week.
Didn't hear.
Yeah. He was a strong supporter of the work that we did. And he did a concert with a country western singer. So there's the cultural blue folk music and red country western music. And the two Davids and Bill Doherty said, wow, we seem to have some magic here. And they started doing these around the country. And now there are Brave Rangers affiliates in every state, in most cities. We've done all kinds of actions and activities and community events and workshops. And so it's really built. as an organization.
So it's safe to say that you were involved in this organization from really the ground floor, close to the ground floor, right?
Close to the ground floor.
In terms of timing, right? Because
within the first year, I got involved.
Yeah. I mean, you say closer, but like, again, this thing, imagine it going for 2 decades, 3 decades, and you look back and it's like, yeah, I was there I was there at the beginning, right? From that perspective, you were there at the beginning. I'm curious about the training, and perhaps even, our listeners will be, you see like town halls all the time about like different voters and stuff, but that's, you're that sometimes that can get heated, but I'm just curious if the purpose of it is to forge this common ground, and as a facilitator, what skills, how might what you're describing differ from, say, what a lot of people have watched is taking voters of different stripes and having them, passionately discuss their issues and what they disagree about, but you have the CNN moderator or a Fox News moderator or whatever. How is it different?
Oh, it's 100% different.
Right.
First of all, we do small workshops, 8 people on each side, that kind of thing. It has to be equal numbers.
Of course.
People identify from the very beginning whether they're a conservative or a liberal. So there's no wondering or guessing or being in the middle. It's like, I lean blue, I lean red. People say that. And that allows for some clarity and for some ability to move forward. So on one of the exercises in the red-blue workshop is the reds meet in one room, the blues meet in another room, and they're each to come up with a list of stereotypes that they think the other side has of them. So the reds may say, oh, they think we're all racist, they think we're all sexist, they think we're,
paranoid about our guns being taken away.
All those things.
Right.
And the blues would say they think we're unpatriotic, they think we have no boundaries, we're loose sexually, all of that.
We have no connection to God and whatever.
No connection to God,
right.
And then you're supposed to pick 5, and among those 5 say, how is this not true? Can you say how this stereotype is not true about yourselves? And then, is there a kernel of truth? Is there a kernel of truth that blues may be elitists? Is there a kernel of truth that reds have been identified with some racist positions? Now, it could be historic. It could be a truth because of what some of the leaders have said as opposed to the population. There are all kinds of reasons that kernel of truth might be there. But being able to share that with the other side is a real humbling experience. And so that's the example. We don't just bring people together and say, talk amongst yourselves and let's see what happens. We have guidelines about respect, about not interrupting, and we keep it pretty focused on questions of curiosity, not gotcha questions. Right. So, for example, right after Trump was elected in 2016, instead of saying, how could you vote for a sexual predator? Right? That's a gotcha question.
It's charged. Of course, it's charged.
It's charged. It has an assumption within it. It's like, when you stop eating your wife? It has an assumption within it that you may disagree with. Instead, a question of curiosity would be, as you entered the voting booth, how did you take into account, what did you think about what had come up about what Trump said about women, and what place did that play in your decision to vote for him? So that's a question of curiosity that allows somebody to say whatever was their truth about that. And similarly with Hillary Clinton, it's like, how could you vote for somebody that destroyed all the emails, of her on her computer? And similarly, how did you take into account what had come out about this as you made your choice to vote for her?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very, very different framing. Also, I wanted to just comment on what you said before, the kernel of truth. It's really, there's an order of operations. In math class, you have to solve what's inside the parentheses first. And so important to give someone the opportunity to say, how is this not true? It's like, well, it's easy to defend myself about the straw man, or the mischaracterization, or there's just, it's a fiction, right? This is a complete hyperbolic, like avatar of what I really am. So I can immediately defend that. And then after I've gotten that off my chest, after I've been the flow and channel with all that stuff, then it's like, okay, now are you curious about a kernel of truth? Are you open to finding, is there a kernel? If you did it the other way around, you wouldn't get very far.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You have to acknowledge people's sense of dignity and desire for dignity.
The respect. Yeah, it's so important to treat others with respect. It's just like, it's like a I don't know if it's a law of energy or however we want to call it. It's not a very scientific thing to phrase it that way, but it's like, just that people, especially if they're coming into something that they're anticipating conflict. It's like, oh, I have so much history. I know that, it's like if every time you go into the movie theater, I'm still in the movies here with the 3D glasses. If every time you go into the movie theater and you step on the ground and it's sticky, well, if you go to a new movie theater somewhere else that you've never been to, it's like, well, I might step on something sticky. Your nervous system has just been deeply ingrained and conditioned to expect that stuff. So it's charged already. So to be able to neutralize that with respect, and I love the exercise of, let's start with how they're stereotyped. Pick something that you think is true in the red circle or the red bubble, that they're talking points or whatever. Because surely you can. It's easy to access that. But it's also perspective taking. It's like, what do they say about you? Yeah.
Right. What do they say? What do we feel they say about us?
Right.
And there's another exercise where we have a fishbowl. So let's say the Reds enter the fishbowl first. And I'm giving you the kind of flagship workshop. There are many other workshops that have developed since, but that flagship red-blue workshop, which got everything off the ground, we do a fishbowl. And the question is, how are the policies of your side good for this country? And people get to say, we do this and we do that, and we care about the economy and we care whatever. Second question is, are there any gray areas where you kind of wonder about your side? Anything that you kind of is a gray area, we're not sure, other things you're sure you're right? Is there anything where you're not sure that you're right about that position, or you're critical of your own side for whatever it is? And that's another opportunity for humility.
Yeah.
And for people to hear the nuance of what it means to be from the other side.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, Reena, I'm curious with regards to training of being a facilitator. Were there what were the kind of credentials, or how can you be qualified? What did you need to be qualified to become a facilitator?
Bill Doherty was really interested in creating workshops that you only needed moderate skills in facilitating. Like, you didn't need to be a therapist or, and so he would ask, have you done any community leadership? Have you taught? Have you, anything like that? And then there was a training to go through. So it's not like there's not a lot of emphasis on the pre-skills that you need. Just if you're open and you are able to facilitate a conversation, then you can learn some of these other skills.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell our listeners a little bit more about in whatever way feels right and appropriate, about the training process, about what like your tool belt, the backpack, imaginary backpack that you're wearing now as you have been trained. What did you learn in the training?
Well, you learn, for one, not to reveal whether you yourself are conservative or liberal. So this was very different when I did the Palestinian Jewish dialogue with my friend Najat, and we knew who was Jewish and who was Palestinian. It was very clear.
Yeah.
This is where the moderator themselves do not share what their orientation is, and to be very careful of not giving it away in any way, not doing things that are culturally blue, let's say, like everybody close your eyes for a minute, like let's take a deep breath, doing things that are more comfortable. I remember around the pandemic, we would say if we had a meeting, we did almost everything on Zoom then. But as we started to meet in person, there was not a big deal made out of, oh, everybody's got to wear a mask, or everybody's got, because that would make conservatives uncomfortable given the atmosphere of what was going on in the country at the time.
Sure.
So that neutrality. What else? Putting the guidelines out before, and then finding ways to stick with them and remind people of them. Getting permission. Do you have permission if any of these guidelines are stepped over, that me and the other moderator can help you get back on track? And get everybody to say yes. And then if it happens, then that's what you do.
You've already made that agreement.
You've made the agreement.
Yes.
Yeah. So those are some of the things that I think I learned from the process, or learned how to do through this process.
Did you share? I know you talked about the guidelines earlier. Did you share all of them? I'm wondering how simple it was. Like what?
We had about 5 maybe, and they were like, no interruptions, no, listen respectfully, meaning no eye rolling, or
the parallels to like teaching a couple skills in terms of like, CBT, good speaker listener, like
right,
making someone conscious of these are gonna energetically take everyone down the garbage disposal.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And you might not even be aware that you're doing these things, but here's what to pay attention to. Confidentiality, in that you can, somebody was just writing me a note the other day that they thought it should be called non, like when you attribute, non-attribution. Like you can say, I heard this read and it was really moving, or I heard a blue speaker talk about this and that. What we don't want you to say is Robin Smith said. Right.
Can I just say that I do have some, not that we have to like go into it necessarily, but it seems useful. I'm a proxy for, and you are too, for listeners. And what's coming up for me when you contrast the difference between the individual's identity and the identity of a red or a blue, of course, there's a thing of like, it's not dehumanizing, but it is a lower resolution of the person, kind of, right? And maybe that's important and necessary, in a temporary way, for the purposes of the exercise. But I just have to speak for the part of me that's like, this red said this. And also there was I know I can speak openly about this. My wife and I used to attend the Washington Ethical Society and they had my wife is biracial, mixed, and they had an exercise where they were like, so people of color are gonna like maybe stay here or go to another room, and they segregated and they divided, and that was I totally understand the perspective of like, when you do that, you therefore give space to be like, I don't have to filter, or now I can say something that I would otherwise be more guarded about if I was in a mixed crowd, or, you know. So I totally get that. And the other side of that, so this is clearly an internal polarization. The other side of that is like, stop separating. Why do we have to segregate? Right off the bat, my inviting me to leave the room because of the color of my skin is really not okay with me, you know, kind of that stuff. So when you say a red and a blue, I do wonder to what degree participants in the group felt, you know, not like I'm proudly red or I'm proudly blue, but they felt in some way othered, or, you know, like just like something else that's precious in them got stripped away and lost, because now it's just, I'm just this flat blue or flat red, as opposed to this four-dimensional being, you know.
Right. Okay, so what I was thinking about, this is about confidentiality. And remember the story I told about the Orthodox Jewish woman and the Palestinian?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. I didn't mention her name. So you can share a story that was moving, that showed you something about the other side that you hadn't known before. But her name is not going out 2 million people.
Of course.
So, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I think that we do get people who don't like that, who don't like being put into red or blue. And if somebody says, I can't choose, then we say, okay, you're welcome to observe the workshop. Because our lane is red-blue polarization. Right. That's our lane. And it's not that we have some activities that, you know, people who are purple can come to. We have different kinds of a Braver Angel style debate, for example, and we have other things where people don't have to identify. But when we have these dialogue workshops, it's important to identify.
Yeah. And again, I appreciate that is in service of safety.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why, right?
Right.
So, and with more safety, you can have more healing, more openness, more change, more transformation.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I did was create all our workshops, and Bill Doherty has developed about 20 workshops. Some of them are how to look at your own depolarizer, how to look at issues of family and politics. There are a whole bunch of workshops that he developed. I developed one. And the one I did is called the Common Ground Workshop. And it started out in Portland, Oregon. There was a group that had me come out and do a red-blue workshop. And then they said, you know, we'd really like you to come back and focus on the issue of abortion, because it's a really tense issue out here. So I developed a workshop where you can take a single issue and have time for people to explain what's important to them about the issue, ask each other questions of curiosity, and then go into a process, which actually I had used with the Jewish and Palestinian women, you know, like 20 years before. But go into a process where they go into separate rooms and they think about what are the values, concerns, and potential solutions or remedies, policies or remedies on this issue, which is abortion. And then they're supposed to be thinking about what are our values, but ones that we think there's a chance the other side will agree to. So you're already thinking about, I'm not going to put out my maximalist position. I'm thinking about what might be some things where we could form agreement. And then they come back and share their lists, and everyone in the room gets veto power to say, that needs to be grayed out, that needs to be grayed out, I don't agree with that. And what you're left with are points of agreement. And it surprises people. We've done this workshop now on many issues, guns, and how to teach about race in the public schools, and homelessness, and healthcare.
Mm.
And people are always really surprised at how much agreement there is. Like what gets left when you know, inside the Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Right? So I created that workshop. And it became one that's really popular because people really like to go away with something, you know.
Yeah, I'm just appreciating how well qualified you were to participate, given your experience, you know, and just how, like, again, I as a person and a professional, like, I'm like, when you described abortion, I was like, whoa, that's a real charge. You know, that's like if you were to be like, Robin, you're gonna go do that, I'd be like, no, who said that this was a good idea for me to go do this? I don't want to go do this. You know what I mean? Like the fear.
Yeah.
And, you know, and this is someone who we're two MFTs, marriage and family therapists, talking to each other. We're used to being in the room with conflict. Now, of course,
absolutely.
Yeah. So, but I'm just appreciating how well qualified you, and how that's so cool that you got to develop that, and what a gift and offering it was for that to then be reinstantiated again and again and again, and on different topics. Part of me is curious about, were there any innovative exercises, or were you kind of blending prior, you know, exercises, and was there anything that was radically new that came up when you were in the creation mode of that group?
We started with the process that I had used with Jewish and Palestinian women, which is each went away, came back, and found where there was agreement. And those, I think it was 10 points of agreement, became the basis of our political work afterwards, what people spoke about and shared. In this case, we figured out that when they come back, they want a second bite at the things that were crossed off. Right?
Okay.
So we put
Makes
them
sense.
in mixed groups and say, okay, have at it. Can you wordsmith this in a way that you can come to agreement? Can you add a concept? Can you take away a concept? You know, what can you do to reach some further agreement? So that was kind of a development that happened through the process of creating this workshop.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I understand the really fundamental process of teams, tribes. It's real deep. It's real deep.
Right.
And so to be able to say, well, are you going to establish that, like, we're going to separate here, and it's friendly, no hostility. You're not in enemy territory, right? And then we're going to come back, and we're still, even though you see other people as not seeing it your way, we have a common goal, a shared goal here. What's interesting is the mixing that up, saying, all right, now instead of being like red, blue, Caps, Penguins, like instead of that, right, we're actually going to be like, now you're with I don't want to say enemy, because that, again, it primes all that, but ideologically, the person who sees
opponent,
opponent, right, exactly. And for that to be two different groups, both of them are mixed. And so, but they also know there's like group A and group B, and it's like, hey, Caps fans and Penguins fans, we got to talk about, are there rules that the NHL where do we think this is ridiculous? We got to get rid of this like highlighted puck business, like screw the people who can't follow the puck, you know, or whatever. And knowing that there's a B group kind of doing the same thing. Right. So it's like, hey, we as a group, as a new entity, are also not alone in our work. Right. So that's,
and we have to, if we know there's somebody in that group who's really not going to like this, well, let's find a way that we might be able to appeal to them, right?
Yeah. The other question that I'm thinking, of course, is just at local, state, like government state House of Representatives, state Senate. Like, to what degree does this work? We're talking about citizens. We're not talking about governmental representatives. But I mean, I see the potential for dealing with humans, right? You can scale this up to the humans who have power at the state level. To what degree has that already been discussed, integrated?
Good question. There's been a lot of work in New Hampshire. The New Hampshire State House has developed a committee that's like a Braver Angel affiliate, kind of. And the reason that this was able to happen is because there was a former state rep that got involved in the organization.
Oh, okay.
So he brought it to the State House, and they're doing some incredible work there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'll tell you another application of the Common Ground workshop that happened. This started in February 22. I got a phone call from the president of the organization, and he said, Reena, elections. Nobody trusts elections. The Reds don't trust it for their reasons of, voter fraud. The Blues think there's voter suppression. Nobody trusts the elections. If nobody trusts the elections, we're nowhere. We've got nothing. I said, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. So he said, can we take this Common Ground workshop and do them all over the country and see where people can agree on how to make elections trustworthy? So that was a challenge. Yeah. That was a challenge. So we did 26 workshops around the country. We found 728 points of agreement. And there was a leadership team with Reds and Blues that wrote a report and issued a report about the what we thought were things that could move forward in secure and fair elections. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, inspiring and filling. It's charging the hope battery. Mm-hmm. Like when you see that stuff happen, especially amidst all the media landscape, wherever you get your media, new media, legacy media, mainstream, fringe, whatever it is, there's a lot of talk about how polarized our country is, and all. Right. So it just kind of just feeds, I don't want to say despair, although certainly some people resonate with that. But when you talk about seeing it work and seeing people come together, especially people from different bubbles, different cultures, different belief structures and ideologies, to see it actually unfold and work and yield, the harvest, the fruits of this, really is inspiring and is reason for hope. Did you say, forgive me if I missed this, did you say that these were in person or online, these different?
Both.
Okay, both. Okay. So did you traveled around the country doing
No,
something?
I wasn't the only moderator.
No, I'm not. I know, but I'm asking.
Fortunately, I didn't have to moderate all of them. I did, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4, but there were other people that moderated the rest. I was in charge of the process of bringing all this together and figuring out how to make a report that would make sense and how to involve people. So that was the creativity project at that point.
Is that report public? Is that can folks go and find that? We should put a link in the show notes to do that.
braverangels.org. You go to the Trustworthy Elections page, and you will find the report.
Okay, and also just for folks who may be driving or whatever, they can't do it. We'll put a link in the notes, and they can go check that out.
Great.
Yeah. So you've been doing this work for what? What's my math on this? 8 years now?
Since 2017, that's when I got involved. So yeah, about 8 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Long time.
Yeah. I'm curious, what's shifted inside of you and how you like, if we were interviewing 2015 Reena and like asked her some questions about the country and politics and, and humanity or whatever, however deep or shallow you want to go. I'm just curious, in what ways have you grown and shifted? How has these 8 years changed you and your outlook, or again, answering that question however you want?
That's a great question. I would have to say the biggest change is I now know conservatives. Mm-hmm. And I have some that are friends. And I have people to interlock with when something doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Or to get mad at, or to, appreciate or whatever.
But when you're a fellow interlocutor, has that changed in terms of discourse and how you how you carry yourself and how you treat the other person? Like if you were verbally sparring with someone in 2015 versus now in 2025, you'd say that that's changed in you.
I hope I would be better at it.
And also another question brews up, which is, what are some new insights about right-wingers and conservatives, Reds, that you didn't have? So what were some of the ones that you say?
That's a great question. My observation of conservatives is that they think, and this is not necessarily strong MAGA people. Mm-hmm. That's a little different, and
certainly different than the conservatives during the Bush-Gore days.
Right, and even within Braver Angels, we definitely have Trump voters, a lot of Trump voters,
of course.
But we've got the ones that are willing to talk to liberals, which is something, right? But I would say the curious thing is that they think that they care about the poor and want to do something for the poor. And they think they want to do something for, to improve race relations. They believe that their ways, they have a way to do these things and they're just different. So that was one observation I made. I mean, I think they're wrong, but
in terms of efficacy, or because you're talking about like someone's like, in my heart, I care, and in my heart or in my mind, these are the methods in which my caring will bring about change so that our society could be healthier.
Yes.
Right. And then that's all independent from efficacy and the actual outcomes. Right.
Right. And, they have their way of evaluating outcomes and we have our ways. I've discovered I have 2 angels on my shoulder. One is the braver angel, which is like communicating and trying to understand and reaching across the divide. And the other is my bitter angel. And my bitter angel is like, you guys are wrong. I mean, that is still alive in me.
Yes.
And I have to contend with these 2 sides.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason why. I mean, if folks who are listening might associate to the old comic or cartoon of an angel and a devil on each shoulder, right? Like that's just a deep, I don't know that there's any culture that can't resonate with that internal polarization. And of course, you framed it not as a angel and a demon or angel and devil, but a braver angel and a bitter angel. These 2, but they're both one occupies Reena's right shoulder and one occupies Reena's left shoulder, and they carry different energy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. And I it's so easy for me to just go really far off into deep spiritual land. So I'll promise I won't do that. That's my agreement with you and with the audience right now. But I am associating to there's this polymath Emanuel Swedenborg, and he well, I won't. I don't want to break my agreement here. I'm associating to him. People can look him up if they want to know more about him. But he had religious experiences, and long story short, was convinced that not only people understand the nature of a guardian angel, but Swedenborg's claim was that everyone gets two. So when you were saying two angels, a braver one and a bitter one, I immediately thought of Swedenborg, and because Swedenborg's like, no, everyone gets two angels and two demons. Everyone gets two. And just now is the first time I'm thinking, yeah, because one's a mentor and being and one's like a supervisee and being like, there's a guide here, and then they have a supervisor. But I don't claim to know any of that stuff. It's just that it's an interesting observation for yourself, Reena, to say that I've got the one that is willing to extend, is charitable, is patient, open-hearted, and the one that has a little bit of an attachment to, like, look, if you get your way, it's going to be bad for people,
Right. And I'll tell you, after the election, the most recent election, my bitter angel was in full steam, mode.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I've come back to, and Bill Doherty's a great person to have in your corner to help with this transition. Come back to, well, you got to talk to them. They won the election, so they have power, and we need to be able to talk to them. We need to be able to reach them. We need to be able to understand,
And I agree with that, independent of who's in power. Independent, because again, I'm just thinking about, like, I don't know what the numbers are these days. 300 plus million Americans, it's citizens of the United States, whatever the number is, it's a lot. And to have a healthy society, even indigenous hunter-gatherer tribes, like whatever the smaller scale, certainly not 300 million, right? It's like, to have a healthy society, you have agreements, and you have, well, if you break that agreement, here's what has to happen for everyone to feel safe and for everyone to maintain trust, and pathways to redemption and forgiveness, and guiding the youngsters to come up, because we're not going to be in physical bodies forever. They got to replace us, and all of that at the smaller scale, and just how tough it is to manage it's not the right word that I want to use, but I have to use it right now. To manage at scale a healthy society. So saying you have to talk to them, they're in power. It's like, well, no, we actually it should be an honor and a great blessing and privilege that we get to talk to someone who can see how blind and foolish we are in our finite perspective, and vice versa. And we only get to share the fruits that we each have by being humble enough. That humility is such an important part.
Right.
And it's not I don't think that's a factory setting to be humble, and to be, well, I do want to say it's a factory setting to be curious, but it just doesn't, it gets covered over in the belief structure so easily. That seems to be the norm.
And so even my bitter angel came out when I said, okay, we right? Still smarting from the election. But I'm getting in a different place, because after the trustworthy election campaign, and the report was issued, Braver Angels had a convention this past summer in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and decided through a vote of the membership, of the people that were there, that the next issue they would do this process with is on immigration.
Makes sense.
And so we are doing it. I'm not being the major staff person, because that was a lot of work. I liked innovating it. I don't want to do it again, right?
Yeah.
But I've been an advisor to the person that is doing it. And that's been really exciting.
Yeah.
And it's a more complex. Elections are very complex, but immigration is so, you have to really understand a lot. And it's been very, very interesting and promising, I think.
Yeah. And rewarding. See,
Right.
I'm curious for you. What do you find to be kind of nourishing about this work?
Good question. Well, probably the relationships with the people, really dedicated group of people, and the creativity of the process is nourishing. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
in that sense of, I'm not, all the work I've done through my years of, social change work, there isn't like this naivete that we're going to enter into the new, right?
Yeah,
Because,
bring the enlightened age.
oh man, we saw Israeli-Palestinian peace get ground to the ground,
Yeah.
But I do think, there's a quote that I just saw come by from Jimmy Carter. It's like, you do what you can with what you have when you can, to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great quote.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't get it exactly right, but
no, I know. I think, and also listeners will know. I'm curious about you talked about confidentiality before, and I've seen things on YouTube. I think the YouTube algorithm, like especially prior to the election, was really had my number and would suggest videos. I can't remember the name of the group, but it had kind of like a circle of liberals and conservatives and a table in the middle, and it's kind of, maybe it's for debate nerds, I don't know, but it's like, so this like one conservative faces like a bunch of liberals, or so it's set up that way. And there are guidelines, and there's a clock, a time, like you get 20 minutes to discuss this issue, and then like people can, like, when the nominated person who's gonna square off toe-to-toe verbally and debate this person is like kind of flagging and not doing a great job, people can like raise a flag and be like, we all vote that we want a better advocate for this issue, and then time's up, and then you switch issues. And it was something like that though, but it was very popular. So I'm thinking about that, and I'm curious to what degree this is something that can be shared and distributed online, or how much is it like therapy sessions happen. They're not, most therapy sessions are not broadcast for the whole public. It's all private, it's confidential, and no one gets to view or witness the inner sacred workings that are happening in that healing process. But in the Braver Angels, was there ever any discussion about, oh, this one's going to be live? For those who are not comfortable with that, please don't sign up for it. And for those who are okay with that, like, let's do that. And then so anything like that happen?
Oh yeah. So Peter Yarrow made a movie about, I think it was the second workshop.
That's right. You did say that as a documentary.
People actually talking to each other through the process of the workshop. Yeah. So and some of the workshops allow media to come. It's sort of up to the local people. We've done a lot of different things like that.
Yeah. So that Peter, last name Yarrow, you said?
Yarrow. He's from Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Okay. So he made the documentary.
Yeah.
And that's out. That's published?
Yeah. You probably can get it from the Braver Angels website, but I don't know for sure.
And it's not, it's not free, or is it?
I really don't know.
No, that's fine. We'll find out. We'll be able to direct for folks who are interested and curious and want to be able to watch that.
Information on the workshop, including signing up for. You can sign up for on the website, Braver Angels website. You can sign up for workshops and one-on-one conversations and debates and book groups and God knows what else. There's lots of stuff.
So we talked also about, Reena, your role as a marriage and family therapist. I mean, I started out the conversation, I selfishly grabbed the mic and had to talk about how impactful you were as a supervisor, but makes sense to ask the question about how you were changed in your, like, how does Reena, the therapist or supervisor, consultant, how has that Reena changed from doing this work? How have you noticed that?
Great question. So Bill Doherty created a workshop called Politics and Family. And it's really, a pre-Thanksgiving meal kind of workshop to take. What happens when there's political disagreement within your family? And there are two things that happen in the workshop. One is to identify the different roles that family members take. Somebody could be the gladiator, like, this is, what everybody should think, and why are you doing, voting for that person? Somebody could be the gladiator. Somebody could be the peacemaker, that wants to get the topic off the table. Somebody could be a sniper who just like pot shots, from it. And the question is how to be an engager, how to be able to have a conversation that's helpful. And Bill Doherty has laid out 4 steps that you can do. Now, it probably doesn't work with a whole Thanksgiving family, but while everybody's watching the football game, can you pull your Aunt Shirley aside and say, I'm really curious. You said something. I'd like to hear more about it.
Mm.
And so you listen. And the beginning part is some active listening skills where this is what I heard. I have this question of curiosity. Here's where I agree. We both agree that, it's troublesome that we don't have control of our immigration system. That is troublesome. Would you like to hear? And then pivot. And this is a step that people usually don't do. Would you like to hear my perspective, which is a little different?
Asking for consent.
Asking for consent. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. This is in the so like I've been completely absorbed by IFS world, internal family systems world, and that's the question that you ask parts of a person's personality, and everyone's walking around with a bunch of polarizations inside of themselves. And I point to my head, but I can easily as well point to my heart.
But then we wouldn't see it. So we see this.
I know exactly. Well, what's the point? But the point being is that I'm jumping off of what you were said with that pivot is you just ask, because it's an act of respect. Are you open to X, Y, or Z? You get, because then the person gets choice. And very often in people's lives, and now I know that now I'm in preacher mode, but very often in people's lives, especially when they're little and they don't have a lot of power, they didn't get to choose.
Right.
And a lot of people's activation when they get loud at Thanksgiving, they're embodying the spirit of someone much younger than Aunt Shirley or Uncle Chuck, whoever has a little bit of gray in their hair. The spirit inside of them that has possessed them in that moment is charged and activated, and one of the things that can de-escalate all of that is the respect and is the sense of agency, and you're not pulling Aunt Shirley aside during halftime in the football game to be like, I'm here with an agenda to enlighten you. You know what I mean? Like, that's right. If you're coming at a family member with that, good luck. I'm not betting on you. I'm not betting on success there. No. You know what I mean? Yeah. So just, are you open to hearing from me? And then they get to choose yes or no. And if it's no, it's like, then that better not be an empty question. Like, you better respect that.
Okay. I respect that. I had a situation where I was talking to a family member where there was a disagreement. It was actually my son. And we got to pivot, and I said, would you like to hear my opinion? And he said, no, because I haven't said da-da-da-da. And he needed to vent more. I was fine with that. And then I pivoted again. And at that point he said, okay. And then the next step is to share your perspective as much as possible, share a story. Because that's what's going to get to them. Yeah. Is if you say, when I was working at the, labor union, or here's what I saw it's something that connects to what's meaningful for you about this, and putting it in a story.
Yeah.
And so when I did that, it worked. I asked for the pivot, wasn't ready. I listened some more. I asked for the pivot. He was ready for it. And I shared, and he goes, well, I can see what you mean there.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't completely agree with my stance, but he could take in what I said.
But the image that comes into my head, how when you have a big pill that you have your pet that needs to take it, and you like let's put this big pill in some peanut butter and give it to the dog. So it's like that's the comedic image that came into my mind, is like it's a bitter pill to swallow, but it can go down a lot easier with the peanut butter or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's why when I was a trainee, I so loved narrative therapy, because I immediately just connected to that idea that, oh yeah, the entire like landscape of reality as a human being is stories nested in stories. And
absolutely.
Experiences and beliefs are all nested in stories. And also how people change is they got to tell their story. They got to be witnessed,
Yep.
So it makes total sense to me that when you're offering your perspective, that it's not just like, did you know that 78% of, it's like, that's not gonna connect. Yeah. Makes so much sense.
Exactly. So, and you're a natural for metaphors, so
I take zero credit. The image of the dog, the golden retriever taking a bill, it's just that's not me. That's something much wiser than me. But thank you for the compliment. That's the thing.
Pay attention. I think here's what I would say, Robin. Metaphors come to all of us, and some people know to give voice to that.
Okay,
right?
Fine. Oh, fair enough.
Don't you feel that as a therapist, like you're attuning to the metaphors that are coming to you, or that you hear from other people?
Yes, and that's because of like conditioning and positive reinforcement. So I learned to trust that that's not going to make things worse, and more than likely it's not going to just keep things neutral. It's been my experience that when I share with clients whatever's showing up in my active imagination, it tends to be helpful for them. And so if it wasn't, I would be disincentivized to do it.
Well, right. And sometimes I find sometimes I'll share a metaphor and they'll say, it's not quite that. It's more like.
Yeah.
Which is great. It's the creative process, right?
Well, and they also feel safe to give you that feedback.
Right. Yeah. So how did we get off on this?
Well, no. So you were talking about the workshop to take for Thanksgiving.
Yeah. So Bill Doherty had created that work, and he actually spoke at a Metro MFT conference in October. He came and spoke. So the Metro Marriage and Family Therapy Association asked me to run a group with therapists to look at the question of what do you do when politics enters the family, when polarization enters the family. And so we've done a couple of them so far, but it's a really important issue. It's really a good question. What do you do when it shows up in your room as a therapist? And one thing right off the bat I know is you can't side with either one of the people, right?
That's a recipe for disaster.
It's a recipe for disaster, but it is not easier said than done when the issues are so volatile for everyone, including ourselves, right?
Absolutely. That's the nature of the therapists who are trained to recognize transference and countertransference, is say like, oh, all this stuff, all my beliefs about homeschooling, for example, are all like flooding me, and now I've contributed to taking safety away from what's happening in the room, because I have parts that have certain beliefs about, or whatever the belief may be, the border, whatever it is, right?
Right. And if you can keep those in check, then you can be a therapist. If those you know, consume you at that moment, and you just have to say what you think.
It's not good. Not good. Not good. That's exactly right. I mean, and then again, from the IFS lens, the parts of the therapist that get activated by material that the clients are bringing in, the therapist has to be aware that that's a part and not who they are. And you know, or if not in IFS world, to translate, it's just like, well, that's an emotion or that's a belief, and I can't let that emotion or that belief, you know, rule the day or impulsively come out. But the other thing is, like, it's there. So how much energy are you burning up trying to muzzle, you know? So it's really helpful to welcome internally, to welcome the charge, right? Like, let's say you as a therapist, your partner is dealing with a substance abuse, or your uncle was murdered by an illegal immigrant, or whatever, right? Whatever it is, right? Like, you're touched, you're human, and suddenly this is showing up in your with your couple or your family. Having the awareness that, oh yeah, you're up right now. This part, again, I'll go back to IFS language. This part is up right now. My job as the professional is to ask, to validate it, and to be like, okay, yeah, totally makes sense that you're up right now. Makes perfect sense. And you're welcome in my mind and thoughts and body and everything, but you're not actually welcome in this session. Can we conference later?
Can we talk later? Right.
Can we talk later? Are you willing to kind of, you can backseat drive if you want, but my job isn't to listen to you right now. I can make an appointment with you, you know? So, and then when that part can soften, then I'll just use myself as an example. Then Robin is able to stay present, stay open, stay neutral. And therefore the clients can then experience safety, continued safety.
And what they need, let's say the issue is the border. What they need is not a really good facilitated conversation about the border, right?
No.
What they need is to see what are the relational issues that are getting kicked up. So we hear this political division, really hard to stay out of the content, but that's what we need to do, and to say, what are the relational components that are happening here, and to go with that.
Yeah. And you're an EFT clinician. You strongly subscribe to emotionally focused therapy. And so, yeah, easy to get lost in content, but what's helpful is for people to be able to give voice and to name it, to tame it, to name what is the emotion that's charged, that's up, that's taken over. And
so the question I would usually ask from an EFT perspective is, what usually happens when you have this political disagreement?
Yeah.
You know, well, she comes in and barges in and tell me this and that. Okay, when that happens, what do you feel? What is the emotion going on for you? And what do you usually do in those moments? And when he does that, when he storms out of the room, what happens for you? So we're dealing with the relationship, not with the content of what each of them thinks about the border.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So how long have you been doing this consult group for Metro MFT?
We just did 2 of them since the new year.
Mm-hmm. And I know therapists listen to this podcast. If therapists who are, you know, not a MFT, or they're let's say they're a psychologist, a social worker, but they do relational work and they're interested in finding out more about this consult group, where could they go? Is this stuff public on Metro's website, or?
It might be Metro MFT, but you can also email me.
Okay.
Do you have my email?
Do you want it on the show notes? Do you want
Sure.
I mean, your website will go there anyway. So if people want to get in touch with you, they can. Yeah.
So, you know, we're looking at principles and, you know, for how to do this, such as talking about keeping it relational, but also people are bringing cases in where they've seen politics enter the family, political polarization into the family, and trying to figure out how to intervene, how to understand it, how to intervene.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important work. I mean, obviously, it's sort of self-evident that it's important work, but I mean, now I'm 40. You don't have to give your age, but you've been around longer than I have. And
Oh yeah.
from your perspective, I'm very curious, especially because of the deep and intimate work that you do connected to politics and specifically here in the U.S. Uh, what's how, I know this is a big question, so I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but how do you compare and contrast the culture, the political culture of the 80s or the aughts and now? I mean, what's different about these three snapshots?
Yeah.
What's the same? Like,
I think things have gotten a lot more polarized, a lot more divisive, and there's a lot of reasons for it. You know, some of it is media. There used to be a fair and balanced, really a fair and balanced law that when presenting the news, they had to show both sides and be fair and balanced. Well, Ronald Reagan in the 80s got rid of that. And so there came the rise of Fox News and all the other.
Ronald Reagan single-handedly, I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
I'm getting an education and I'm very ignorant in this domain. How can I know presidents can issue executive orders, but like specifically, so there was a law codified in legislation about news being communicated in a fair and balanced way. I'd be very curious to read that law.
Right.
And
And
Reagan,
then I don't remember whether it was an executive order or Congress that was under his control at the time. Repealed.
okay. So if it was an executive order, then it's fair to point fingers at Reagan. But if it was Congress during his administration, then it was that Congress that did. But it was during the Reagan administration.
During the Reagan administration, he signed the law, right, and probably advocated for it, and so forth.
What's the motive? I mean, you don't have to have an answer for this, but I wonder, what is the motivation to say, actually, fair and balanced doesn't. Someone has to. Usually, people act because they're like, well, I think this will make it better. This isn't right. Someone's getting hamstringed here. Like, this is wrong, and we got to make it right. And so the right thing is to not have it be fair and balanced.
The right thing is to, from their perspective, is to not have government regulation that interferes with the expression of people's First Amendment rights.
Right. Okay. Well put. I can understand why someone that on the fortune cookie low resolution version of that, it's like, oh yeah, who could not get behind that?
Right. And so, but it gave to the rise of, cable news and Fox News and, all the, right-wing media is incredibly powerful. So I think that's been a component of politicization. This is a little bit out of my field, so next time you get a social scientist on, ask them. I think personally, Donald Trump has been incredibly polarizing. Mm-hmm. And so it's all of that.
It's funny that you say that, because I've had Dr. George Whitehead, my former social psychology professor, on a couple of times on the podcast, and a part of his specialty was had to do with, I can't remember if it was during political campaigns, it was like messaging, or it escapes me at the moment. But yeah, I was just curious from your perspective. So
what I've seen.
Yeah, your lived experience. Yeah.
I mean, Ronald Reagan was a real bummer. His presidency, I mean, hurting the unions. There was a lot that happened that was very that was very hard in the 80s. That was like sort of pushing things. And then Newt Gingrich came in and didn't want the Democrats to get anything done. And, you know, if people forget, but Bill Clinton was under investigation every moment of his presidency. You know, there was a lot that went on around that. Not for the things he really needed to be investigated for. Whitewater, you know, all these, some deal. Anyway, so I think that it's just gotten worse and worse, and it's pretty bad right now.
Well, when we say like unregulated free speech, I mean, or presume that that's part of what's driving to say like, okay, news, the dissemination of the news is being muzzled by government, and that's not a good thing. Now, I remember the Reagan quote or whatever is I'm here from the government and I'm here to help or whatever. So, like that's not great. And there's reasons for that, and I can appreciate those perspectives, but I'm associating to, you know, even in a therapy session, we're two therapists talking to each other. Like, you don't just have the clients coming in because there's something going on in their life that they're struggling with. There's a dilemma, there's problems. And you don't just say, well, the therapist is kind of there to just watch. You know, it's like, no, you actually need these guidelines and stuff. And so for news dissemination to have any of those constraints or those guidelines kind of ripped open makes sense why it's worse now. It's worse now. Cable news it not only is there the difference between the actual like just the news, like the Associated Press, but all the opinion stuff. And I'm tuning in because I want you to feed me what I want to eat. And
it's interesting about Fox News that they were sued for having put out misinformation. I think it was by the Domino computer, electoral computer programs that, you know, people would go and vote.
Dominion, not Domino, right?
Sorry.
Yeah.
And in the conclusion of that case, is the Fox News people presented, we are an entertainment organization.
Right.
We're entertainment. That's how we get away with lying.
Yeah.
Or not telling the truth. So the whole concept of media and news has really shifted from where you had these three networks and, you know, they all said there was agreement pretty much that this was what was going on in the world. And it's a very different scene now. Which is not even to mention social media.
Oh yeah, no, you don't. Yeah, that's a whole other, you know, catalyzing, technology. So, but in the middle of our conversation, there was this real sense of hope, and I'm curious what gives you, knowing what you know. So I don't know. I am interrupting a little bit of the question that I asked about your perspective in 80s, aughts, and now. But we kind of went through talking about the legislation, and I think enough people have had the conversation about how social media is not helping things. And that, again, as much as good as technology can come, it can bring gifts, but it can also bring, you know, fire that you're not ready to wield or manage yet, and it can burn things down. But what gives you hope about the work that you do and the potential, its potential, whether that's scaling or whether that's just, you know, sometimes change happens like a beaver in a dam, an earthen dam, and you just need a little hole, and then the water will eventually clear that stuff out. You know, what gives you hope related to the work that you do?
Great question. I think for me, I operate on, you know, like the therapy room, and then the therapy room kind of is a model of what might be happening around, you know, outside there in the world. So if you change one couple from being able to stop fighting and put their kids first, let's say, that's one model out there in the world. And maybe that'll impact their relatives and so forth. It's very small scale, but I think it's the same kind of thing with the red blue work. It's like we are forging relationships. We're showing that things can be done differently. We're putting that out in the world. And yeah.
And hopefully it leads to generative change, that it's
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's important work, and I'm so thrilled that you were able to come join and share your experiences and your knowledge with our listeners today.
Thank you, Robin.
Yeah. Is there anything else that, before we bring this in for a landing, is there anything else that you feel it would be important for listeners to know related to the Braver Angels project, or your practice, your work, anything upcoming that comes to mind?
Good question. I think that there are so many, but one of the ways Braver Angel operates is like 100 flowers bloom. So there are so many things going on for people to be involved in that could be really interesting and exciting. And it's, you go to the website and you say, sign up for an experience, and everything's free. I mean, you can join as a member for $12.
You'd be supporting a good cause.
It's a good cause. And I guess my point is, you can have a really interesting experience for not a lot of effort. And it's tailor-made to the kinds of things that interest you or make you feel safe. So I encourage people to do that.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. And I feel the impulse or the instinct to answer my own question just by saying that, even though from your perspective, the longer perspective than me, just as a lived experience, I was born in the mid-'80s. Even though the polarization seems to be getting worse, one thing, maybe a message of hope for folks, is the idea that, so I'll start with just the analogy of, like, if your house is a mess, just start, like, I'm sitting at my desk right now. There's like sticky notes. Just start, start real local.
Right.
Are you capable and willing of putting that in the trash or the recycle? Right? Can just start. So, because sometimes it can be very overwhelming, and people just get like despondent, and they're like, I don't know. What the hell can be done here?
Right.
And so, but just with regards to polarization, I'll go back to it again, is that everyone's carrying polarizations in their own nervous system, in their own heart, mind. And one of the invitations I can give to listeners of this conversation is you're invited to pay attention to when you get charged around political conversations with your loved ones or neighbors or community members. And rather than trying to, I'm associating to some friends of mine right now, rather than trying to install the wisdom or the right beliefs into other hearts and minds, start with your own by disciplining your own heart and body and instinct and impulse to educate someone, and start with humility and curiosity and patience. And I know that's a big ask, because
it makes me think, when you go to the site, then we have something called one-to-one conversations. So you can request to be paired up with someone from your opposite political position. You can talk about a particular issue. We have something directly on the Israeli-Palestinian peace on there. So you can sign up for a one-on-one, and we have guidelines, and I promise you it'll be a valuable experience.
Oh, awesome. I'm really glad you said that. That's a great that's a great invitation.
Yeah.
And you'll be changed from it. You'll be made more whole and more integrated. You'll learn something, that you didn't know before. Yeah, which is a real gift. Well, Reena, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you. Keep it up, Robin.